This video will demonstrate how to configure a dial number plan in ICM for CVP blind transfers, and a reason for why one would want to use a dial number plan versus the typical CTI route point for doing blind transfers. So why use a dial number plan, and what exactly does it do? Basically, the recommendation is that one should use the ICM dial number plan for blind network transfers. So, which means basically this allows CVP to drop the call to the first agent and set up a new call to the second agent without hairpinning through the signaling, through the call manager or communications manager. If you typically think about how a post route is done once a call reaches an agent, the agent typically will go ahead and initiate a transfer using the CTIOS desktop and put in a number. Now that number will most likely typically is configured as a CTI route point in the communications manager, and that means basically ICM hands off that request to call manager to make a decision, and which again comes back into ICM typically to say, okay, which agent do I transfer this call to now? So that's where the hairpinning is occurring. But in a blind transfer scenario, we really don't need to cause that hairpin of going to Cookham and then coming back into ICM. When the agent initiates a blind transfer, the call, basically ICM should make that decision right away without having to go back to Cookham and then coming back into ICM. So this is what the dial number plan allows you to do. For warm and consult transfers, you still have to use a route point. So what we'll demonstrate is now, okay, how do I do this in ICM? And basically you use the bulk configuration tool, and under that there's a dial number plan bulk insert tool to create your dial number plan. The versions used for this demonstration are CVP 702, ICM CTI OS 721, and Call Manager 700. So let's take a look at how we would go ahead and configure a dial number plan using the ICM configuration tools. On your ICM box, on the config manager, go ahead and launch under the bulk configuration insert, launch the dial number plan bulk insert tool. Now in my case, I already have a dial number plan configured for a test that I have run, but basically I will go ahead and show you what I did initially to create this. In my case, I had the dial number number plan I was looking to create was, say, once the call reached agent 1, in order for me to initiate a blind transfer, I'm going to dial 8552. And basically what I want to happen when I dial 8552 is, from the desktop, or the agent desktop, is for that to be, in a sense, intercepted by ICM, recognizing that 8552 is a configured dial number plan, and then just go ahead and execute the associated script with 8552 without ever sending the request up to call manager, and I don't even need to configure a route point on call manager for this to work, because it's a dial number plan that I'm using. So basically what I did was I went ahead and put 8552 as my wildcard pattern. The routing client I pick is the communications manager PIM as my routing client, because it's a post route happening from an agent that's currently on that peripheral. And then for the post route, it is a post route, so I say yes, and then I pick the corresponding dial number that I also created on that routing client, in this case the call manager routing client. So notice, even I had already created a dial number, which is 8552. And what I'm creating now is another matching what I would call the dial number plan. Now, if I could go ahead and actually make this 85XX, so that for any 85 patterns, it would always associate that to 8552 as the dial number, which then would be tied to a routing script, which means that if I dialed 8559, that pattern, which would be interpreted as a dial number plan, would be associated to 8552 as the dial number, which would execute the associated script. But not to confuse things, if we keep it the same this way, then this is pretty much all you need to create a dial number plan. So, you know, in this case, and again, I would pick like private network for the dial number type plan because it's just in my lab. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and save this because I already have this configuration. So let me show you what that configuration is. If I look at the edit part of it, if I say edit dial number plan bulk edit and launch that tool, and then I pick my call manager routing client and do a retrieve, you can see I have a bunch of dial number plans created. 8552 is tied to my communications manager PIM routing client. It's a post route. It's tied to 8552 as my dial number. I just kept a one-to-one relationship to make things simple, but you're not limited to that. And then again, I just picked private network. So that's it. All that means basically now is when I go ahead and from a agent desktop dial 8552, that would mean that ICM would basically intercept this, recognize that it's a dial number plan. I don't need to create a route point, an associated route point on Cookham. But also keep in mind that I would not be able to dial 8552 from a hard phone, because when you dial 8552, that same number from a hard phone, that request would go from the phone to Communications Manager to say, what does this dial string mean? If 8552 is not defined anywhere on Communications Manager, your request is not going to route. So dial number plan is specifically for calls that are originated from the CTIOS desktop, and specifically in this case, as we mentioned, for blind transfers where we have no reason to go to the Communications Manager to finish that, to do that request. That's the end of this demonstration on how and when to use the dial number plan in ICM with CVP.